Well, welcome to this session on how governments can improve tech savviness. I'm Rogier Klimby. I'm your host for today. In daily life, I work at a lobbying firm, but I also do a lot on GovTech, that hip new term that everybody likes, on how to connect government with business and also with startups, and how to make sure that you can really have government work better with technology. I'd like to welcome our speakers, Kiann, Stenkjaer, Hein from Denmark Public, and Jan Middendorp MP in the Netherlands. Kiann, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Kian Hein, and I'm Managing Director of Public Denmark. And what we work with is bridging between tech startups and government in order both to create a thriving business, but also to improve the services of government, and in that sense bring about a transformation of government and how they serve citizens and companies.
Cool, excellent, thanks. Jan.
Thanks Rogier and Evita for inviting me to this excellent panel and momentous place to be right now. I'm a spokesman on digitalization in Dutch Parliament for the VVD, and I'm from a background before I became a politician. I was working in investment banking, but the step to politics wasn't only a complete change of surroundings, but also it brought me on the frontier of what I think is the heart of government's work right now, digitalization. So I'm looking very much forward to engage with you on that.
Cool, excellent. What we are going to discuss, obviously, is then how do we want to make sure that government adopts digitalization better than we have so far. Obviously, the COVID-19 development of the last month is an extremely interesting to that in a moment. But Kiann, what are your experiences so far in Denmark from working with public, with the Danish government to get them more tech savvy and more up to speed with the digital side?
What we do see is a clear interest in Denmark for this field from many players, only from government, but also from tech companies, from the bigger vendors, from universities, from investors, and so on. But it's not an easy field to engage with, because there are some barriers between government and startups that also restrict the way that they are dealing with each other. But we do see quite a good interest in Denmark. And just to show how the interest has played out, the Ministry of Business in Denmark has launched a GovTech program, which we were operating for them. And the purpose of that program was to try how you can solve various challenges within government by the help of startups and by the help of tech and innovation. And also at the same time to get more knowledge about the barriers between the two parties. And this was running for the past year or so. Since the level of digitalization in Denmark is quite high, for a number of years we've been ranking at the very top of the not only the European rankings but also the international rankings. I think that it's a natural place for Denmark to place itself with this interest in how can we put digitalization in Denmark to the next level. How can that be brought? So that's what the Danish government has tried.
Okay, you mentioned obviously you guys are very, as the Dutch are often. We saw in the Startup Genome report as well, but also in some reports from the European Commission over the last days that let's say our countries in Europe are quite digitally savvy. That's a logical thing to say. The results prove that. But what then are, from your side, the barriers you still encounter, right? Those are the interesting things. If we're way up there, then what is there to become real world-class leaders, right?
Yeah. I think that the players that have been in this field so far, within what could you say, the level of digitalization that we have reached so far, very much the existing players and existing vendors and so on. But the government hasn't really engaged with the segment of startups and all those new companies coming with novel ideas about how to do things. They are starting to do that now. So what I would say is that we have seen like an old digitalization. It has brought us to this level where we are now, and that is very good. But we need to be taken to the next level. And I think that in order to do that, we need to government need to engage with a new kind of companies who have different kinds of ideas and are maybe closer to the universities, closer to research and so on.
Okay. And Jan, is this just something you recognize, the old being the barrier to the superb, if I have to put it that way?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're seeing in the Netherlands, but what we're seeing very clearly is that people after COVID-19 are looking how to kickstart our economies, obviously. We have a lot of talk about monetary stimulus, economic, fiscal stimulus, and I'm a great proponent of what we should do now is get to digital stimulus. You said a few things about tech savvy or not. I think we are, it's great to see that both Denmark, Netherlands, and a few other countries obviously are ahead in Europe, but we're not halfway there. I think when you think about what could a digital stimulus mean in this time, you got to think about not only about money and investments, a lot of talk around that, rightly so, but if you think about what is it, the digital environment that governments can help build. And I completely subscribe to what Kiann has said about working in open platforms with the private sector. So I'm going to focus on what can the government do. People talk a lot about digital infrastructure, obviously. I always then add to that the people that work in digital sectors. Having the people that work in data centers, they are vital right now. It's not a natural idea of government during a crisis like COVID-19 that people who work in data centers are vital. Thirdly, besides digital infrastructure and the people that work there, rules and regulations sounds very boring, but it makes a very big difference in the medium to long term. What kind of rules the government makes to give both the private sector or cooperation between government and private sector the possibilities to deliver to the citizens using digital tools.
And Jan, what the last one, right? What would you think of? Because obviously using rules and regulations to make sure that governments are more effective in the digital side, but also obviously stimulate the landscape. That can be a host of things. So what would you be thinking of?
Look, here in Parliament, I have proposed for the government to create for every Dutch citizen an online identity. I mean, we shouldn't get into the different perceptions of online identity, but if you take a passport in the digital world and as a government, you can create something like that in the digital world, that could be a huge step. There's a lot of discussion around that. This is something governments should be doing. They're delivering passports to citizens for centuries, and something like that is needed online. Let me give another example. I took an initiative to create principle-based, market-based rules to set a framework to make use of algorithms. Like 1.5 years ago, I mean, I think that those are the kind of things that governments should do, and it's not like let's make something up. We are new terrain. It's going to be we need something. We need strict rules or less strict rules. You need to have it completely right. The gap. So as I said, the government, at least the Dutch government, is doing quite well and is advanced and is tech savvy, you could say. But if you just do a gap analysis with the private sector and you transpose that on what government is doing, there's so much more possible. And I think the citizens of the Netherlands have the right to a government that tries to achieve that.
Okay, excellent. I see an interesting question from the audience. Obviously, we are all from relatively tech-savvy countries. Gianluca asked correctly, what can we do to support other parts of Europe? What lessons can they learn from us, if I put it that way? Not saying that we do everything right, obviously, but what can they learn from us to kind of support the development in this GovTech sector? And so starting with you, Kiann?
Yeah, I think that in some respects that the newer countries, they might be in a good position actually to leap forward because they're not restricted by old structures. So that is maybe of course they can learn, but maybe we can also learn from the newer countries or less digital mature, since they are not in a structure that hinders progress. But I would say that one of the things that you should take into consideration is that digitalization is not about only digital solutions to the surface, but it's also deep structures, and we need deep structures, and we need a very solid framework. Like, how do we handle data? What kind of architecture do we have? What kind of basic structural systems do we have? And how do we make them play together in a very efficient way? Because it's not enough just to think about digitalize the upper layer, but you need to go deep down. Yeah. Let me also add to what Jan said about bringing new life to the economy. I think that is quite right, that is a dire need, of course, now. And I think that many people do not really realize the buying power of government. For instance, GovTech is estimated to be worth 400 billion USD per year. So it's a huge market where you could have many new entrants, and you could by that boost economies, and you could bring life to new players and giving them a platform so that they can grow, and by that further strengthen the economy. I think that we need to realize that we have all these government packages giving relief to companies, but I would say that in some cases maybe government should just buy something from the companies instead of giving relief, because that's just a better way to do it, and by that taking more chances and experience more in order to bring the government and the public sector forward. In Denmark, there has been a proposal to make a digital fund wherefrom civil servants could seek funding for projects that would also include new players, SMVs or startups or new tech players, so that there is an experimentation that could start. I think that's a strong element also in this.
Yeah, I think that's a valuable point you make there on the market part and the buying power of government, right? It's something that's often overlooked. Mm-hmm. Just linking that to your point, Jan, you made on the infrastructure and the people side, right? Would the Dutch government, would investing in that space make in part more sense than handing out the loans, if I have to put it that way? Is that something you would think be a viable option?
Yeah, I think it's a great point that Kiann just made. So I agree with that. There's a lot of the state is a big player in with its buying power in the digital market. So definitely, and I think if I may make an analogy there, if you take it one step further, it also actually is true on the intellectual side, not on the financial side. So what we discussed at the start, how we're talking here about improving tech savviness. I don't know if you mean the tech savviness of the government, but I think the government can play a big role in improving the tech savviness of the whole of society. What I saw in the Netherlands the last couple of months is kind of a breakthrough on things that I've been talking about, and Kiann said a few words about it at the start for a while. What happened was that people were sitting at home and they all had the feeling we need to do something. So all of a sudden, things like video conferences between civil servants, private sector, not-for-profit were taking place. They were engaging ideas in open debate about the situation at hand and how each and every one on the video conference could contribute to it. That's an exchange of ideas, probably quite normal within the ecosystem of Silicon Valley, but in the Netherlands, having constituencies like civil servants, private sector talking together and engaging ideas, that was quite special. And it was great to see that. It's necessary because, as I said, it's new terrain. So wrapping up the answer, the short answer is that not only in buying power, the government has a huge role, but also in intellectual idea generation, giving innovative ideas a hand to bring them further. Big role.
Now, just obviously, right, the COVID-19, we mentioned it a few times, and you said that correctly, Jan. I agree with your assessment that has probably driven the digitalization of many areas, including obviously government, in quickly, rather quickly. But my question would be, obviously, on the longer term, is that something, is there something, this is this way. It's a specific incident we're talking about. What are the longer term things we need to kind of push? What buttons do we need to push to really make it work, right? Because yes, my fear would be everybody's on video chat now. By the time everybody goes back to normal, we go back to the good old same old legacy issues, etc. Right? So my question would be to both of you: what are the 2-3 things we really need to push the buttons on to make sure this change is permanent, right?
Yeah.
Kiann, maybe you first.
Yeah. Let me add that I really do agree that we have been leaping forwards due to Corona, and everybody has been online and on Zoom and everything, and we have managed to make society work even at a distance. That is very clear that we have seen what a burning platform can actually do to society, and we have also seen that the structures and the digital structures that we did have in place, at least in the Danish central administration, were the ones that were able to underpin that we could actually make society still work. But I must also add that we have also seen the pitfalls. We have also seen how difficult it is for government to reach out for new solutions. And let me take an example from Denmark. We had a smaller startup who wanted to launch a COVID-19 tracking device, an app, to the government for free. But they couldn't really they couldn't talk with the government. They didn't know what doors to knock on. They didn't know who was responsible. They didn't know how to make the way through the system. And in the end, they just had to say, okay, we can't give you this product, even if we can see that it's really needed, that you can see who are infected by Corona and who are not. Of course, it was anonymous, but anyway. And in the end, it turned out that the Danish government they bought a solution from one of the let me be so frank to say, one of the usual suspects, one of the usual vendors, and they paid a lot of money for that solution because it was just easier for them to deal with the company or the vendor that they knew instead of engaging with a new company. And that tells me that it's very, very hard still, even in a situation where you have a burning platform, for government to engage with new companies. And even if those companies they come and offer you a solution for free. So I think that one of the learnings that we have is that government should be much better at embracing new tech. They should be much more capable of taking in new tech and new offers.
Jan, is this something you recognize? And, obviously my follow-up question would be, what can we do about it, right? Because this is something I recognize very strongly, the gap between the do and, we ought to be able to do something about this, I would think.
No, I would complement Kian's answer. I would say my objective would not be to stay where we are in terms of homeschooling, etc., etc. I think the focus should be on the learning points. So I'm gonna mention then 3 things, if that's okay. Which is number 1. Keep this open working approach, this new approach I described, I saw in the Netherlands, and I think Kiann said a few things about that also in terms of that it didn't work, but at least then there was a learning point. If the private sector cannot reach to the government with good ideas, then something is wrong. So I would say in this period we learned those things and we should implement them in the way government works, because in my view this co-work relationship between private sector and government should stay as we saw during the crisis. Secondly, the conviction that rules and regulations for digital are going to be decisive for the way our society looks in the future, at least our digital society, but my assumption is we will be more digital in the future. So you need strong conviction for that, and we're here among each other. So I'll tell you a secret: not all politicians are very interested in digital. Don't tell anybody else. But so I think that's really that mind shift. We need to drill it, bring it home, drill it down every time, because it's going to fade away, I'm afraid. And then finally, for that, you will also have to, at some stage, make changes to the way government works traditionally. In the Netherlands, we have a great system of siloed departments, and well, that's probably not even a secret, but these departments all have their own digitalization projects, and sometimes they are exactly the same, but they still don't work together. So that's an example of what if you ask what should we change, that's what we have to change. And I've been working on that in Parliament every day.
Cool, excellent. Now, the funny thing is that there are 2 related questions in the Q&A on this. It's actually from Sagar Bavara, who actually says, what kind of role can government play to actually make sure this support goes within our kind of countries, is set up so that other countries can learn from this. Now, obviously, that we've partially answered that question already. What would be interesting to know is to link that to the next question by Peter Paul from Oerle, who's actually from the Next Web. And he said, what would your advice be on exactly these kind of collaborative innovation programs, right? Where you bring together government, corporates, research, and these techies. Now, Jan, you already said a bit on it, right? We need to break through the silos. And maybe Kiann, from your experience, would you advise something comparable or something different? With just one note, and then I'll hand it over to you. My experience is exactly the same as yours, Jan. I see a lot of next to each other programs who need to learn more from each other, and also a bit of issues on once you get to the end of the program as a startup, what actually have you done for government, right? And what has government been able to learn from you? So with that, Kiann, maybe on the point of innovation programs.
Yeah, let me just shortly address something that Jan said about that politicians may not be that interested in tech. I think that is true, and maybe many people are not that interested in outside our circles. But I think that everybody is interested in that we create as strong and innovative society as possible, and we are very interested in taking care of the big complex agendas like the climate, like taking care of the elderly, like having a good educational system, and so on. So I think that maybe it's very important to look at the end goal instead of the measure how we get there. It's more important to say, if we want to have a state-of-the-art health system, there's no way that we are going to reach that without making investments into new tech and being open-minded into adopting new tech into our healthcare system. So I think that could be a very important learning to say, how do we bring about that? And then returning to the question, what could be done? One of the ideas that we do have here, and it's not a unique idea, but we would really like to make a GovTech hub here in Denmark, where we exactly bring together the entire GovTech ecosystem, which we think is there are many players in the ecosystem, so that they can get closer to one another, can learn, so that they can see what works and what doesn't. And I think also that we need to take a look at the political value stream or the administrative value stream, because I think that it's very important that you get new ideas, innovation and tech into the system already at the level where you're thinking about your new policies, about how you are going to solve this problem, that you collaborate at a very early stage with the people who knows about that, so that you know what kind of solution would be feasible in a certain space.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable to start it up really early. That's really important. I think, what also comes to mind, but we only have a few minutes, so I have one final short question for you guys to address, and please do follow up then with your final thoughts on this issue. Is, we've talked about national government, right? And Robin Rose in the Q&A asked also, should this be national government? Should this be municipalities or regional government, right? Obviously I can imagine there's a mix for all of it, but what would your ideas be on that? And I'll start with Jan this time. National, regional, municipality, and then also, as I said, do share some final thoughts with us, because then we're nearly at the end of the session. Jan, over to you.
Look, this is an excellent question, and it's also going back to the question of Stenkjaer, I think. You have to realize that we built the subsidiarity and institutions, at least in the Netherlands. We took quite a bit of time to do that. And we are now on new terrain, as I said, digital. We're building a digital society very quickly, and we need to somehow also create this subsidiarity system within that digital world. So that's a challenge. And when people ask me the question like Stenkjaer is asking, do you make a model and then you deliver it to local communities so they can scale it up? That's an excellent way of doing it. And if you look at how the big tech companies do it, they have a product which is so good that everybody wants to use it, and that's always the answer. So when we conclude here on this seminar that we are going to allow some people in government to build something and everybody should use it, it's probably not going to work. We have a chance that it works, but most likely it won't work out like that. So the thing is, and then I get to my final thought naturally, that you need to be a bit tech savvy. You need to build something that people want to use and that municipalities want to use. And if you do that, you get the same kind of network effects and you build great solutions for your citizens. And if you don't do that, you keep on pushing and you don't get where you want to be.
Good point. Thanks, Jan. Thanks also for taking part. Thank you very much for taking the time. Kiann, over to you for the final thoughts, and obviously also on the regional municipality, etc.
Yeah, I think that in Denmark we have seen a strong result coming from the various levels working together, like the state level and the municipality level and the regional level, and being in agreement on principles and being in agreement on architecture and on how to handle data and so on. So I think that the role of the state would primarily be to define, or the role of the state in collaboration with the other parties would be to define the digital infrastructure, on top of which municipalities and the regional level can build their individual solution, because I think it's also important that you give some way to the local level so that they can build the solutions that are really needed by citizens, and since they are closer to citizens, I think it's quite important that they are actually involved in this.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time as well, Kian and Jan, again.
Pleasure.
I think we had an interesting session.